Okay. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, we're back with another Way Back Wednesday with Wayne Hunt, and we've also got Beecher Hyde with us today. And so I'm going to let Wayne share with you guys a little bit about what he found in Snead's Cornerstone that he was able to get last year and dig up some items from 100 years ago, back when Fielder was built. They kind of built this into the actual building itself, and so he was able to dig that out last year, and it is very interesting, very neat stuff. So I'm going to let Wayne kind of show you guys what was in it.
Yeah, well, it was, Lindsay. I mean, as you know, you were with us, but it was we had known about this for a long time, for several years. Had known that this was there. We had the newspaper article, that described it. And we talked to try to get this done. We could never just get it to where we could sit. Anybody decide, yeah, go ahead and do it. Well, finally, in 2020, last year, the administration gave us the okay to go ahead and do that. And so it worked out just as well because it was 100 years. If it had been before, it wouldn't have been 100 years, but it was 100 years was a good time. So in 1920, the article states in November of 1920, they had the cornerstone laying ceremony in Fielder Auditorium. So Fielder was already, the wings of this building were built in 1920 at that time because they had the ceremony in Fielder Auditorium. They had several speakers. They always had to play some hymns. They had hymns that they sang. And then they all retreated outside to the front of the building where they had made a makeshift stage. And they had some more speakers, and Mr. Corley then describes the articles that he had chosen to put into the time capsule in the cornerstone. Now the cornerstone, if you look at the cornerstone out there, it's not just a typical cornerstone. It's not the face, it's actual corner. It's a block of marble that was actually set into the masonry, and in that block of marble was a capsule or a cavity that they put a time capsule in. Unfortunately for them at the time, all they had to work with was just a copper box with a lid on it. And so the things that they put in there, which there were quite a few things, but very few of them survived the 100 years. This is one of the handbooks, the Snead handbook, which this is what it would look like originally, and 100 years later, this is what it looks like. Of course, this one is 100 years old now, and it's a little bit better shape. But it hadn't been out in the weather for 100 years like this. But it can still be opened to some degree, and you can tell what was, some of the things that were in it. But this was the 1920 yearbook for Snead Seminary. And also included in the box was a copy of the Chattanooga Daily Times newspaper of November of 1920. And you can see, I won't take it out of this bag because it's very crumbly just to touch it. It actually just comes apart. But this was the newspaper. And now these were newspapers that were, they were like saddle blanket size newspapers. They were huge newspapers. And so they had to fold it many times, and very tightly to get it into this small box. But I worked with the Chattanooga Archives division in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to get a copy of that actual newspaper. And this is it. This was the November edition 1920 newspaper. And come to find out, there's actually not a single thing in here that relates to Boaz or the seminary. So the Chattanooga the archives were interested as well as to why that would have been. So together we decided that there was a circulation of the newspaper down in this area at that time. And so there were some connections with the seminary, with the Methodist conference here and the Methodist conference in Chattanooga. And so that must be, through that avenue, this was just a paper that they regularly took down here. And so it's interesting, how did they get that paper here? Well, it would come on the train. It was delivered, obviously, which made that easy to do. So those were just some of the other things that were included in it that were just completely destroyed. They're of absolutely no value today. Were several photographs, which were about 10 or 11 photographs in there. That the matting, if you've seen some of Mr. Geiger's photographs, it has that matting around it with the little lace kind of detail and all on it. You see some of those in here are of his. And they were that way. So we know who took them. You know, they were Mr. Geiger's photos, but they didn't survive. The photo itself was completely destroyed through the years. But nonetheless, how interesting it is that, here these things were placed in this capsule 100 years ago, and now to be able to reach in and take those things out of that box and show them the light of day again, after 100 years is quite an event. So we were glad to be able to do that and have these things now, to show and to say, well, here's some things that people actually handle. Somebody actually handled these things. So, quite an episode. So.
Cool.